You weren't hurt because you were too kind. You were hurt because you weren't dangerous enough to make people think twice before hurting you. That's the truth. No one ever told you. Not in school. Not from your parents. And definitely not from the ones who left you behind. We were raised to believe that if you're good, honest, and selfless, life will reward you. But Machiavelli saw through that illusion long before the rest of us. The world doesn't reward purity. It respects control. He didn't write to comfort you. He wrote to wake you up. Because if you walk through life assuming people are fair, if you speak the truth thinking that's enough, if you offer kindness without boundaries, then you've stepped onto a battlefield, wearing nothing but hope. Machiavelli wasn't sweet. He didn't teach you how to be loved. He showed you how not to be destroyed. And if you've ever been betrayed by someone you tried to save, been abandoned by someone who once begged you to stay, been overlooked because you didn't scream for your worth, then this video is for you. Not to turn you into a monster, but to make sure you stop living like prey. Because if you don't become the wolf, you will always be the sheep in a world that no longer forgives softness. It's not the loud pain that breaks a man. It's the quiet kind, the kind that builds up behind the smile, the kind that no one sees, because you were raised to endure it in silence. You played the role. You showed up. You were kind, consistent, giving even when no one returned it, and maybe no one said it out loud. But deep down, you knew something was wrong, because the more you gave, the more they took, and the less they respected you. You were the one who listened when no one else did. You were the one who forgave what most people would have walked away from. You were the one who made yourself smaller, softer, quieter, just to be kept around. But here's the truth. The world never punishes cruelty the way it punishes weakness. They didn't mock you for being kind. They ignored you, because your kindness came without consequence. They didn't fear losing you, because you never gave them a reason to believe you'd leave. And the worst part, you thought that was strength. You thought love meant always being available. That being good meant never setting boundaries. That real connection came from full transparency. No walls. No armor. No silence. But Machiavelli would have looked you in the eye and said, "You've mistaken virtue for submission. And in doing so, you've made yourself disposable." You see, in a world that values image over essence, perception over truth, and control over connection being too real becomes a liability. That's the pain no one talks about. Not the heartbreak, not the betrayal, but that moment when you realize you were never loved for who you truly are. You were tolerated for how easy you made their life. You bled in silence, bandaged their wounds while yours stayed open. You gave loyalty to people who used your love as leverage, and the more invisible you felt, the harder you tried to prove your worth. You worked harder. You spoke softer. You apologized first. You made excuses for their absence. You waited, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they'd see your value. But Machiavelli's shadow looms in moments like that. Moments when survival no longer depends on how good you are, but how strategic you're willing to become. Because here's what most people don't want to admit. There is no prize for suffering quietly. There is no trophy for being the man who stays silent while bleeding. And there is no justice in a system built to exploit your silence. You didn't lose them because you weren't enough. You lost them because they saw you would never walk away. And people don't cherish what they believe will never leave. So now the question is not, how do I become lovable again? The question is, how do I become someone they know better than to lose? That pain you've been carrying. It's not weakness. It's proof. that you've been too open in a world that only values what it can't fully understand. So what do you do now? You stop explaining. You stop overgiving. You stop bleeding for those who never stayed to clean the wound. You let the silence return. Not because you've given up, but because you've woken up. The silent pain was never your enemy. It was your warning. Now it's time to listen to it. Because the next part of this journey is not about feeling better. It's about becoming someone the world no longer overlooks. And Machiavelli. He wouldn't ask you to be cruel, but he would demand this, that you never again allow yourself to be harmless. Pain doesn't come from nowhere. It's engineered. You weren't just unlucky. You were conditioned, trained to play a role that benefits everyone, except you. From the moment you were old enough to be shaped, you were told, be good, be nice, be humble, and maybe someone will love you. But no one ever told you that in a world ruled by perception, goodness without strength is invisible. And Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He was born in Florence, not in a time of peace, but in an age of political savagery. Italy wasn't a country. It was a battlefield. City-states like Florence, Venice, Milan, and Rome were chess pieces, moved by hands that didn't believe in fairness, only in control. In that world, loyalty was for sale. Honor was a costume, and truth was a coin flipped only when convenient. As a child, Machiavelli saw people hanged upside down in public squares, not for breaking laws, but for questioning power. He saw democracy celebrated on the surface, while behind velvet curtains, names were rigged, votes were bought, and dissent was erased, like a stain on the floor of a palace. Florence called itself a republic, but it was an illusion, a beautiful mask hiding the machinery of manipulation. That's the world he came from, not a school of morality, but a theater of masks, where survival meant knowing which one to wear and when to take it off. And here's the part that matters. You live in the same world today. Only the architecture has changed. The actors have new faces, but the mechanics remain the same. Social media rewards appearance over substance. Corporations promote culture while silencing dissent. People praise honesty in public, but punish it in private when it threatens their comfort. So when you wonder why your truth was rejected, why your vulnerability became ammunition, why your transparency made you the target, understand this. You were telling the truth in a room built on illusion. And Machiavelli would say, you were never weak. You were simply unarmed in a war you didn't know you were in. Because the world isn't structured to protect sincerity. It's structured to benefit those who know how to wield perception like a weapon. You think the workplace promotes fairness? Look again. It promotes obedience masked as team spirit. You think modern relationships reward vulnerability? Only when it's aesthetic, curated, and timed. What hurts the most is not that you played the game wrong. It's that no one told you you were even in one. But that's what Machiavelli offers you. Not comfort, not fairness, clarity. He wasn't writing to the dreamers, he was writing to the disillusioned. The ones who looked behind the curtain and realized, this world isn't evil. It's just brutally indifferent. And if you want to survive it, you must learn how it actually works. Because until you do, you'll keep confusing being liked with being safe. You'll keep mistaking being needed for being respected. You'll keep trusting in systems that were never designed with you in mind. This is not about becoming cynical. It's about becoming aware, because the only thing worse than being manipulated is never realizing it happened. And the only thing more dangerous than a lie is a man who still thinks the world plays fair. If this stings, Good. That means you're waking up. Because in the next part, we talk about the traps you keep falling into and the invisible habits that keep you powerless. You weren't born weak. You were just taught to act like it. Taught to explain yourself when silence would have spoken louder. Taught to overgive, hoping they'd finally see your worth. Taught to stay, even when staying meant abandoning yourself. These weren't just random choices. They were patterns, invisible threads woven into your thinking, tied to an idea you never questioned, that if you were just good enough, they wouldn't leave. But that's the mistake, isn't it? You believed your value was something others could validate. That being endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving, endlessly available would make you undeniable. And yet, you were denied. The people you gave the most to often gave you the least. The people you never made wait kept you waiting. And the people you thought would stay only stayed as long as you didn't ask for anything. Let's make it plain. Kindness without strength becomes currency in someone else's transaction. You weren't building love. You were funding someone else's comfort. You confused loyalty with fear of being alone. You mistook silence for virtue. You called self-betrayal empathy. And the worst part, you got good at it. You learned how to disappear in plain sight. How to smile when you wanted to scream. How to nod when your boundaries were being bulldozed. You convinced yourself that suffering quietly made you noble, but Machiavelli would disagree, because he understood something that most people never want to say out loud. Those who fail to understand power are always the first to be punished by it. He watched rulers fall not because they lacked heart, but because they had no strategy. He watched good men die, not because they were wrong, but because they mistook moral purity for armor. And you've been walking through life bare-chested in a world full of blades. Let me tell you the truth, most won't. People don't respect what comes without resistance. They don't value what's always available. And they don't stay loyal to what tolerates being disrespected. If you don't define your worth, the world will do it for you. And it will always set the price far lower than what you're truly worth. So the next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, don't. The next time you feel the need to prove your intentions, pause. Not everyone deserves access to your truth. Not every situation requires transparency. And not every criticism is worth a response. Because your energy is a currency, your presence is a privilege, and your peace, that's your territory. Let them earn it. Let them feel the cost of underestimating you. Not through revenge, not through rage, but through restraint. Let your absence speak what your words no longer will. And if this is hitting something in you, if you feel like this video is peeling back layers you didn't even know you were carrying, then take a moment with me. Because this kind of content doesn't exist in mainstream media for a reason. It's not designed to entertain. It's designed to wake something up. And if this message matters to you, if it's helping you see yourself more clearly, then I invite you, truly, to support what we're building here. Our team pours everything into making each episode, from research to writing to editing, so that you walk away, not just with words, but with weapons for the mind. You can support this mission directly through Super Thanks below. It's not just a donation. It's a statement that you believe in deeper conversations, that you value the truth even when it cuts, and that you want more content that speaks to your strength, not your comfort. And if you haven't yet, please take a second to like, comment, and subscribe. Because sometimes, sharing a message like this is how someone else wakes up from the same illusion you just broke through. And from me and the entire team behind the screen, thank you for showing up, for listening all the way through, and for choosing growth, even when it hurts. Now, let's keep going. Because the next part, That's where everything starts to change. Machiavelli didn't ask you to become ruthless. He asked you to become real. That's the part most people miss. They read The Prince and call him dangerous, call him immoral, call him manipulative. But that's only because they still believe the world rewards the good. Machiavelli didn't. Not because he was cold, but because he was honest in a way that still makes people uncomfortable to this day. He didn't romanticize leadership. He didn't dress power up in virtue. He told you what it was. A force that survives through perception, not purity. He wrote in a time of violence and betrayal. Florence was beautiful on the surface, but beneath that elegance was a power structure built on fear, blood, and gamesmanship. And in that brutal chaos, Machiavelli made a radical declaration. It is better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both. He wasn't saying love is worthless. He was saying love is fragile. That love can disappear the moment you say no. The moment you disappoint. The moment you stop playing the role they projected onto you. But fear lingers. Fear doesn't demand your perfection. It simply requires you to be someone whose presence creates pause. And that, according to Machiavelli, is the essence of real power. Not manipulation, calculation. Because in the real world, a leader is not judged by his soul. He's judged by his outcomes. His ability to hold the line, to preserve order, to survive chaos. That's where his philosophy diverged from idealism. He separated morality from leadership. He didn't throw away virtue, he just refused to pretend it was enough. Because in a world where your enemies are willing to lie, cheat, and destroy, your goodness is only a shield if it's backed by strategy. Machiavelli said, "A man who always tries to be good will come to ruin among so many who are not good." And what he meant was this: if you lead with heart, but without structure, if you love, but without limits, if you give, but never calculate the cost, you won't last. And you certainly won't lead. Because people follow confidence, not confession. They obey presence, not pleading. They trust the one who can make hard decisions, not the one who waits to be liked for making them. That's not cruelty. That's reality. It's easy to admire men who are good and kind. It's much harder to become the man who can protect what he loves in a world that tests him constantly. Machiavelli wasn't interested in fairy tales. He was interested in outcomes. And the outcome he pursued wasn't domination, it was survival. Not just for the ruler, but for the kingdom. Because what good is a kind man if his kindness allows his enemies to burn everything behind him? This is why Machiavelli's philosophy hits so hard, because it doesn't cater to your desire to be liked. It challenges your willingness to be misunderstood in order to protect what matters. And this is where your transformation begins. When you stop asking, "How can I be accepted?" and start asking, "How do I become untouchable without becoming unrecognizable?" Because the line between goodness and weakness is razor thin, and if you don't learn where it is, you'll bleed trying to prove your worth to people who were never qualified to measure it. Now you begin to see. Machiavelli never glorified deception. He glorified clarity. He never told you to become cruel. He told you to stop confusing silence with strength, and to stop offering transparency to people who only value control. This philosophy wasn't meant to make you feel better. It was meant to make you sharper. So sharpen yourself, because in the next part, we'll talk about what happens when you begin to turn that clarity inward and how you rebuild your worldview from the ground up. This is where everything begins to shift. There's a moment, if you're lucky, when the illusion finally cracks. You stop hoping they'll understand you. You stop bending so you won't break. You stop trying to explain to people who were never listening. And in that quiet, something else begins to form. Not rage, not revenge. Clarity. That's the shift. You no longer want to be accepted. You want to be solid. You no longer beg for peace. You start building power. You no longer shrink to keep the room calm. You learn to command it without raising your voice. This is what Machiavelli understood better than most. Real power isn't about volume. It's about weight. The weight of your silence. The weight of your gaze. The weight of being a man or a woman who doesn't flinch. You've spent so much of your life trying to be understood that you never asked the better question, do I even understand myself? Because when you truly know who you are, you stop offering proof. You stop justifying your pace. You stop translating your intuition into language for people who can't hear it anyway. Instead, you begin living with direction, not based on feelings, but based on alignment. You say less, but mean more. You give less, but what you give becomes sacred. You allow less access, but those who reach you feel it. Because now, your presence is no longer for sale. It's earned. That's the psychological shift Machiavelli was pointing to. Not becoming someone else, but finally becoming someone you don't abandon just to be liked. Because when you live in reaction, when your value depends on others noticing it, you're not leading your life. You're surviving their perception. But when you claim sovereignty over your choices, over your energy, over your silence, you start moving like a ruler, not a follower. And no, that doesn't mean you dominate others. It means you refuse to be dominated by their confusion. It means you stop arguing with people who benefit from misunderstanding you. It means your no is quiet, but final. Your boundaries, unannounced, but absolute. And your presence, no longer a comfort zone, but a mirror reflecting back the power of someone who's done bleeding for the ungrateful. This is how you become the man or woman who no longer needs to defend your identity. You've outgrown the need to be soft, so they can feel safe. You've outgrown the lie that being good means never drawing blood. And you've realized that sometimes silence is not peace. It's permission. And that ends here. Because now, your clarity is sharper than your compassion. Your instincts louder than their opinions. And your self-worth no longer negotiable. This is the moment when the world still looks the same, but you've changed. And it can feel lonely at first. Because most people stay trapped in performance, in explanation, in apology, but that's no longer your path. You've stepped into a new kind of presence. Quiet, strategic, unshakable. Not because you've become heartless, but because you've learned to protect your heart like it matters. Because it does. And when you finally feel that shift settle in your bones, you won't chase anymore. You won't beg anymore. You won't shrink anymore. You'll walk. You'll hold your line. And you'll let the world adjust to you. Clarity, without action, is just a concept. Understanding without movement is just comfort with better vocabulary. Now it's time to make it real. Because the world doesn't change when you think differently. It changes when you move differently. Machiavelli knew this. His genius wasn't just in observation, it was in application. He didn't just say, "Be feared." He showed you how to create fear without ever raising your voice. He didn't say, "Abandon morality." He said, "Don't let morality blind you when the stakes are survival." So what does this look like in your world? Presence over performance. You walk into a room. You don't explain yourself. You don't overshare. You don't smile to earn safety. You observe. Let them feel the shift. Let your silence be a question they can't answer. And when you speak, make it clean. Make it deliberate. Say just enough to reveal you know more than you're saying. That is how power moves. Not with noise, with gravity. Boundaries. Without apology. You used to explain your no. Now, it's a full sentence. You used to entertain disrespect out of politeness. Now, you leave the room without a word. This doesn't make you rude. It makes you undeniable. Boundaries are not walls. They're invitations for others to show you whether they deserve access or not. And the moment someone pushes them, you don't fight. You don't prove. You withdraw. Because in a Machiavellian world, your absence is sometimes more powerful than your presence. San, information is ammunition. Stop telling people everything. Your dreams, your wounds, your next step. Most people don't listen to understand. They listen to position themselves. So you say less. You let them speak. And you gather data while they reveal their agenda. This doesn't make you manipulative. It makes you prepared. Machiavelli didn't distrust the world because he was bitter. He did it because he understood it. Everyone sees what you appear to be. A few experience what you really are. And that's your edge. The less they know, the more they guess. And in that guessing, you hold the advantage. You're not here to impress. You're here to command. Not through dominance, but through discipline. Not by shouting, but by showing through action, restraint, and presence that you've stopped playing games and started shaping outcomes. Because this journey isn't about appearing powerful. It's about becoming someone who no longer bleeds to be seen. Someone who no longer performs vulnerability to earn closeness. Someone who no longer explains boundaries because your presence already sets them. Now, let's keep going, because in the next part, we explore not just what power looks like, but what it feels like when you finally stop asking to be seen and become someone the world watches in silence. Real power doesn't walk into a room looking for attention. It enters, and the room adjusts. Not because it demands it, but because it commands it without saying a word. You've seen this man before. The one who doesn't rush to speak, who doesn't fight to be heard, who doesn't need to convince you of anything. He listens more than he talks. He doesn't explain his boundaries. He simply lives by them. And when someone crosses the line, he doesn't argue. He disappears, and you feel it. This is the new face of power. Not aggressive, not loud, but deeply rooted. It's the man who's been through hell and came back with a spine forged in silence. It's the woman who stopped making herself smaller so others could feel bigger. It's the human being who has mastered the art of holding presence without ever asking for permission. Because once you've seen what Machiavelli saw, once you've understood that perception is often stronger than truth, that kindness without leverage gets mistaken for weakness, and that transparency without boundaries becomes ammunition. You stop trying to be palatable. You become precise. You say less. You do more. You stop playing to be loved. You start moving in a way that says, I am not here to be accepted. I am here to be respected. And it's not about becoming someone else. It's about returning to who you were before they told you that softness would save you. You can still be kind, still be generous, still be warm. But it's no longer unconditional. Because your energy has conditions now. You're no longer the man who bleeds just to keep the peace. You're no longer the woman who swallows truth to avoid tension. You've learned the cost of that. You've lived the price of disappearing for others' comfort. Now, you show up differently. Not with ego, with essence. You take up space not to dominate, but because you've finally stopped apologizing for existing. You've stopped explaining who you are. Because now, you know. You've stopped performing confidence. because now you embody it, and the world feels it. They may not understand it, but they feel it. That's the new face of power. It's subtle. It's sharp. It's self-contained. It doesn't need to be validated, because it is rooted in something deeper than applause. It is rooted in sovereignty, the unshakable clarity that says, I do not owe you my soul, my softness, or my silence, because you've already tried living the other way, and it cost you more than anyone knew. Now, there are no more performances, no more negotiation of your identity, just presence, still, focused, unmovable, not because you've become cruel, but because you've become clear, and clarity is a language the world can't ignore. At some point, you reach the crossroads. You've seen behind the curtain. You've outgrown the illusion. You've stopped apologizing for not being easy to control. And now, you stand between two roads. One leads to power, the other to the idea of peace. But here's the truth. No one says out loud, peace sounds beautiful. But in a world built on strategy, perception, and control, peace without power is just surrender with prettier language. Machiavelli understood this. He chose power, and he paid for it with exile, ridicule, and centuries of misunderstanding. Not because he was evil, but because he dared to say something few people ever admit. If you want to protect what you love, you must first become someone the world knows, not to cross. You can't hold peace if you can't defend it. You can't sustain love if you need it more than the person you're giving it to. You can't demand respect if you've taught the world to see you as replaceable. And that's what this has all been leading to. This moment where you finally ask yourself not, how do I avoid conflict? Not, how do I stay soft enough to be liked? But what am I willing to become, to never be powerless again? Because power isn't noise. It isn't aggression. It's not domination. It's clarity. Clarity that creates consequences. It's presence that doesn't ask to be respected, but makes disrespect costly. It's posture, not posture-telling. It's moving through the world, not with fear, but with stillness so strong. It destabilizes the chaos around you. And yes, it means being misunderstood. It means letting go of the need to be liked. It means choosing strength, even when your softness begs for permission. Because power is lonely, but peace, without power, is fragile. So here's the real choice. Do you want the kind of peace that depends on staying small? Or do you want the kind of peace that comes from knowing no one takes from you without consequence anymore? You've tried the first. You've lived it. You shrunk. You bent. You stayed silent. And it didn't save you. It only taught people that your kindness had no spine behind it. Now you know better. And now you choose to become someone who isn't ruled by approval, someone who doesn't hand over their worth in exchange for affection, someone who can love deeply but never at the cost of their own self-respect. That's the kind of peace worth having, the kind that stands, the kind that protects, the kind that doesn't ask, it declares. So whatever you're walking into next, don't ask to be spared. Don't ask to be seen. Don't ask to be understood. Ask only for the clarity to never be a victim again. Because the world doesn't pause for your goodness. It moves. It calculates. It replaces. And the only way to survive it is to become the force it can no longer ignore. Not because you shout. Not because you threaten. But because you finally remembered who you are and who you were never meant to become. You are not here to be harmless. You are here to be unbreakable. They told you to be patient, to wait your turn, to tone it down, to soften your edges so the world could hold you without bleeding. But you were never meant to be held like that. You were never meant to be agreeable. You were never meant to be harmless. That fire inside you, the one they called too much, the one you buried under manners and moderation, was never the problem. It was the warning, a quiet reminder that you were born to carry something heavier than comfort, that your presence was meant to shift rooms, not decorate them. They made you feel guilty for wanting power, but they never apologized for taking yours. They taught you to suppress your instincts, while they celebrated people who used strategy to rise. But now you see it. Now you remember. You weren't here to beg, to chase, to be chosen. You were here to become someone that silence can't ignore, that manipulation can't reach, that chaos can't shake. This isn't about being feared. It's about never again asking permission to exist at full strength. You don't owe the world your softness. You owe it your sovereignty. So what happens next? That's entirely up to you. You can close this video and go back to the performance, to playing nice, to shrinking politely, or you can mark this moment as the one where everything shifted, not because you got louder, but because you finally got clear. No more apologies. No more explanations. No more waiting. This is your line in the sand. This is the version of you that no longer seeks survival but sovereignty. And if they still don't understand you, good. That means you've finally become something they can't control. Welcome to your new chapter. You're not watching anymore. You're becoming. And the world, it just felt the shift.